Our big story this week. India celebrated its 78th Independence Day. Prime Minister Modi spoke about a continued reform agenda. So how will India chart its next course of action in the field of economics, politics and technology and other such areas, including climate, disaster relief? That is our big story. This is a special India Ascends episode where we do a bit of crystal ball gazing into India's journey to superpowerhood. Is India at 2030 and beyond going to be completely different from how it stands right now, economically, politically, and in terms of the power projection that we've been talking about? On the economic front, India is poised to be a $7 trillion economy, the third largest in the world. On the global political stage, India will be one among the two powers in Asia and play a very active role in shaping the entire Indo-Pacific region and most certainly the Indian subcontinent, which was also going to be the epicenter of a lot of power play in the next 5 years between India, China and America. And as I see India's roadmap to 2030, I envisage three clear trends that will take place. First, there will be a definitive push towards building a clear grouping geared to address the China challenge in Asia and particularly in the Indo-Pacific. As India grows, its strategic and security calculus will have to be driven towards addressing the threat China poses. The grouping could be either the existing Quad with a clearly defined territory charter against China, or even a Quad Plus where ASEAN countries could formally be part of it. Remember, ASEAN actually faces a lot of the threat that China poses on waters. The second trend will be a more mature and deeper naval presence in the Indo-Pacific and a clear power projection in Asia. India does not need to build bases far away since it's not an aggressor, unlike a China. But locations like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are close to the Malacca Straits, will have to be developed and in fact must be developed to ensure that they are more than just existing research locations. And the third clear trend will be a clear shift towards technology and tech-enabled economy. India is getting on the semiconductor bus late, but that doesn't mean it cannot catch up. And the way to do that is to focus on the assembly, testing and packaging part of the value chain. This is the low end of the semiconductor value chain, where China currently dominates. One where companies can be incentivized to shift operations to India, and one where every country in the world wants to ensure that they can have that shift. Assured availability and supply of semiconductor chips is a global concern, and I feel India stands to gain significantly if it provides just the right set of SOPs in the next couple of years. To talk on all that and more, let's get in the set of top voices on the show. We've got a lineup of power-packed top voices. First up on the show, Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow at the Asia Research Institute, joins me to talk about what could India be in the next couple of years and the India-China power equation as well. Mr. Mahbubani, thanks so much for speaking to me on India Ascends. So my first question, what do you think should be India's moves going forward, directions in Asia and in its neighborhood in the next couple of years that could define its position in the Indian subcontinent?
Well, I'm extremely optimistic for India. You know, there are 193 countries in the world. It's actually quite surprising that the list of countries the number of countries out of 193 countries for which you can feel strongly optimistic for is not very great. But India is on top of the list of countries that you can feel optimistic for. And India's growth is just beginning. You know, it's like where China was in the 1980s, 1990s, and then you saw subsequently how fast China grew. So India is approaching its takeoff phase for its development. And like many people, I'm optimistic for the future of India.
Mr. Mahbubani, I am very optimistic about this, about India's prospects. And that's exactly my next question, which is that you've talked about China and the long game that it plays. How do you see the India-China equation going forward? Because we're talking about a rising India, a growing India, and a slowing China. The two trends coming together.
Well, I think the India-China relationship is one of the most important bilateral relationships in the world by far. And I think if India and China can maintain peace and keep on growing economically, both of them, then frankly, we will have the Asian century that I've spoken about. My book, The Asian 21st Century, when the German publisher published it, I asked them how many downloads you expect. They said, we'll be happy if we get 20,000 downloads. But instead of 20,000 downloads, there have been 3.6 million downloads in 160 countries. So it shows you the world is psychologically preparing for an Asian century. But for that Asian century to come about, the two Asian giants, China and India, must be able to get along. And I can tell you that many of the countries in Asia are worried about the China-India relationship, and they hope that there'll be some kind of stability. That China and India will never become close friends. Okay, that's not on the table. But if China and India can maintain a workable relationship and continue to have normal trade and economic relationships, then I think, frankly, both China and India can prosper without necessarily having to become close friends.
Okay, so but what about the power equation, the power dynamics in the Indian subcontinent? Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Maldives. It's the same India-China equation that's coming to play. How do you see it?
Well, I would say, next to India is a region called Southeast Asia. And out of the 10 countries in Southeast Asia, 9 have an Indic base. The civilization of Southeast Asia have been influenced by India dramatically. And most Indians are not aware that the most successful regional cooperation organization in the world is in Southeast Asia. Even though Southeast Asia, with 700 million people, close to 700 million people, is the most diverse region on planet Earth. Yes, 250 million Muslims, 150 million Christians, 150 million Buddhists, Mahayana Buddhists, Hinayana Buddhists, Taoists, Confucianists, Hindus, communists. It's a remarkably diverse region, and yet that is growing incredibly fast. Okay? And I'll give you one statistic. In the year 2000, Japan's economy was 8 times the size of ASEAN's economy. 8 times in 2000. Now it's 1.2 times bigger. By 2030, ASEAN will be bigger than Japan, which was the second largest economy in the world. So there are parts of Asia that are growing and thriving and doing very well. And there are huge economic opportunities for India in Southeast Asia.
There's also a region where there are deep American interests. How do you see America in this power dynamics in this region?
Well, I can tell you that ASEAN, when it was created in 1967, was attacked as a pro-American organization. In fact, both China and the Soviet Union condemned the creation of ASEAN in 1967. And sure enough, ASEAN has amazingly managed to maintain close ties with the United States of America and managed to maintain close ties with China also. And the United States has invested more in the ASEAN region than it has in China, Japan, South Korea, and India combined. That's an amazing statistic, amazing. So it shows you, and at the same time, the China-ASEAN trading relationship is the largest trading relationship in the world. It came to almost $1 trillion in 2022. So you can see, therefore, that Southeast Asia has learned to handle the relations with both China and the US extremely well.
All right, Kishore, Mahbubani, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV on what India-China dynamics is going to look like in the next couple of years. But how does India move ahead? What will India look like and its geopolitical equations look like in the next 5 to 6 years? We've got another top voice on the show. That's Vikas Swarup, former diplomat. He's former spokesperson of the External Affairs Ministry, joining me on the show. Mr. Swarup, we speak at a time when India at 2030 conversation is gathering pace. We celebrated the 78th Independence Day. How do you view India in the next 5 to 6 years from an economic as well as a geopolitical point of view?
Yes, I think, look, right now India is in a geopolitical sweet spot. If you look at our entire neighborhood, there's a lot of instability. We are the only bedrock of stability in the neighborhood. And internationally also, India is now acknowledged as one of the poles of the multipolar order. Our HADR capabilities, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief capabilities are recognized the world over. Most importantly, earlier when India was seen as part of the problem, now India is increasingly seen as part of the solution. So I think that is the big change that has come. And come 2030, I think we would be the third largest economy in the world. And that itself will add to India's heft. It would add to India's weight in world affairs. And it would further expand, I think, India's soft power as well as India's hard power.
If India is part of the solution, then tell me, sir, how is it going to now shape the future world order?
No, we are shaping the world order already. I think we will shape it even more in the years to come, because on any important conversation that involves the entire world, whether it is climate change, whether it is cybersecurity, whether it is international terrorism, whether it is global health, you cannot do without India. After all, we represent 1/6 of humanity, which means our voice has to be heard. And more importantly, the decisions that we take in all these vital matters are decisions that will impact the rest of the world. So our voice is definitely already being heard and will be heard even louder in the years to come, just because of the sheer weight that we bring to international affairs in terms of our population, in terms of our economy, and most importantly, in terms of our human resources. Because, India is one of the youngest countries in the world. We will provide probably 25% of the world's labor force.
Mr. Swarup, Kishore Mahbubani just joined me on the show, and the first thing he said was India-China don't need to be friends. They need to find some way of working together with each other. How do you view the India-China equation? Because that's really going to decide the next few years and decades for Asia and the world.
No, security is very, very important. And unfortunately, we live in a neighborhood, which is a bit volatile, which is prone to instability. And then we live next to two nuclear powers, Pakistan and China. So from that point of view, security is paramount. It's very, very important that we secure our neighborhood, because, the whole purpose of India's foreign policy is to secure a favorable external environment for our domestic development. And that is why securing the neighborhood becomes very important. And that is why we have the neighborhood first policy. Because if your own neighborhood is not stable, then how will you move and how will you work towards stability in the wider world? So that's why I think neighborhood first is very important. And, we are forging partnerships with each of our partners, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Bhutan, whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Maldives, whether it is Sri Lanka, whether it is Myanmar. With all of them, we have ongoing dialogue, we have ongoing cooperation mechanisms. We have contributed in a major way to their progress and development. Of course, we also have to deal with challenges. And I think China is a major challenge. But I think the beauty of diplomacy lies in managing the challenges and enlarging the areas of cooperation and shrinking the areas of disagreement.
Indeed. And for the next 5, 6 years or 10 years maybe, for India to actually take leadership of Global South, how important will be areas like climate change and disaster relief, where India needs to lead from the front?
Climate change is obviously, I think, the foremost challenge facing the world at the moment, because as the UN Secretary General has warned, we are on a catastrophic path to almost 2.3 degrees centigrade warming, which would mean absolute catastrophe for, not only the human ecosystem, but also the animal ecosystem, the plant ecosystem. And that's why, agreements like we had during the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, during the Glasgow summit are important. We have to phase down our use of fossil fuels. We have to increase our use of green energy. We have to, try and make development as sustainable as possible. And I think India is taking a leading role in this. Some of the world's largest solar plants are coming up in India. We have massively upscaled our own use of renewable energy. And I think Prime Minister Modi's vision of this lifestyle for environment is very, very important. Climate change is not just an issue of global warming. It is also an issue of our lifestyle choices. If our lifestyle choices are going to be such, which are going to contribute to global emissions, then, whatever we may do, we are not going to be in a in a good position. And that's why it's important that we change our own lifestyle. We try to live in harmony with Mother Nature and try to adopt climate-friendly policies, programs, and of course, our own daily schedules in sync with the environment.
Ambassador Swarup, thanks so much for speaking to me on NDTV.